of buildings is neglect. This has happened in a lot of situations where we have tragic results. Even the result in the gas explosion we had in Harlem a few years ago, where people smelled gas for weeks and did nothing.
Larry, we have just a minute left, but I have to ask you, a lot of us live in older buildings. Are there any special precautions we should take?
You just look for cracks that are in movement. That is the biggest thing. Look for cracks that are moving. Look for walls that aren't straight and true anymore, or they're going out more. That is really what you need to look for, especially if you just recently painted and all these cracks are popping up. That's an issue, and you should take concern about that.
Larry Ubel, CEO Managing Partner of Accurate Building Inspectors. We'll have to leave it there. Larry, thank you.
Thank you.
WNYC is supported by Canyon Ranch Linux, the all-inclusive wellness resort in the Berkshires, offering curated services including a wellness and beauty spa, fitness, gourmet cuisine, mind and spirit activities, and more. Learn more at canyonranch.com. Netflix presenting Maestro. Bradley Cooper directs and stars as conductor-composer Leonard Bernstein, and the love story chronicling his lifelong relationship with actress-wife Felicia, played by Carey Mulligan. Awards eligible.
On the next Brian Lehrer Show, if it's Wednesday, it's the day after Mayor Adams took questions from reporters at his weekly Tuesday news conference. Our Liz Kim will have clips and analysis of his answers on the Bronx building collapse and more. Also, we'll preview a performance at the Minetta Lane Theater called The Future is Around Us. It's magical realism about being a black woman in America. The Brian Lehrer Show, weekdays at 10 a.m. on WNYC.
Marketplace Morning Report is coming up next, and then in 10 minutes at 9 o'clock, it's the BBC NewsHour on WNYC. Let's check in with London to see what they're working on. London, good morning.
Good morning, WNYC. I'm Nuala McGovern. On today's NewsHour, a deal is done at the COP28 Climate Summit, but does it go far enough in tackling the use of fossil fuels and also provide for a just transition for developing countries? That's BBC NewsHour coming up at 9 on WNYC.
Right now, sunny and 44 for a high today. Tomorrow's going to feel much colder, staying in the upper 30s with a lot of wind. It's going to feel like the mid-20s. Once again, 41 and sunny at 8:52.
There is a global agreement to transition away from fossil fuels.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by the United States Postal Service, offering holiday postage stamps for purchase at more than 40,000 supermarkets, drugstores, office suppliers, and wholesale clubs. And by Schwab. Schwab offers investors choices like full-service wealth management, self-directed investing options, and trading on Thinkorswim. More at schwab.com.
I'm David Brancaccia. The UN Climate Summit has wrapped up in Dubai a day later than expected with what many see as an historic achievement. Countries have agreed on language that says the world has to shift away from fossil fuels. Marketplace's Nova Safo reports.
Up until this climate summit held at oil-producing United Arab Emirates, countries have danced around two key words. Here's COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber.
We have language on fossil fuel in our final agreement for the first time ever.
Indications that this was going to happen brought opposition from Saudi Arabia and OPEC. The final deal does not call for a phase-out of fossil fuels, as many countries wanted, but transitioning away from their use. It's a compromise deal.
The fact that happened at all is significant.
Tom Rivet-Carnac is one of the architects of the Paris Climate Accord.
The fact that it happened in a fossil fuel producing country is potentially remarkable.
Now the focus will be on what actions countries actually take to implement the non-binding agreement. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
Environmental activist and former Vice President Al Gore, who had blasted an earlier version of the agreement, welcomed this one, although he noted loopholes and half measures that he said shows the influence of petrostates. Meanwhile, here in 2023, there's record pumping of crude oil, over 13 million barrels every day. This and slower growth in China are among reasons oil prices are down going into this winter. Crude oil's below $70 a barrel this morning, around its lowest of the year. This even as OPEC countries try to trim production to prop up prices. Longtime energy economist Philip Verleger is a senior fellow at the Niskanen Center.
I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that global oil demand is shrinking. So prices likely may fall in the future. Given those circumstances, the smart strategy is to boost production and get the oil out as fast as possible. That's what's happening.
Another force here are mergers and acquisitions with $100 billion in oil deals this year involving the shale oil from West Texas and southeast New Mexico. The big global oil companies are more likely to pump when the math looks right rather than unofficially towing OPEC's line.
What has happened is large companies like Exxon and Chevron are moving in, and Exxon and Chevron look at prices and say, if the prices justify increasing production, we'll increase production.
AAA says it's $3.13 a gallon on average right now, lowest of the year at the gas pumps. The Federal Reserve will brief the country on the economy and inflation in just about 5 hours, but very likely will not change interest rates. Markets S&P futures are up 0.1%, NASDAQ futures up 0.2%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by C3 Generative AI. Verified traceable answers, secure, hallucination-free, LLM-agnostic, IP liability-free. Learn more at c3.ai. And by Financially Inclined, a podcast from Marketplace is all about money lessons for living life your own way. Listen to the new season wherever you get your podcasts.
Music streaming platforms are rolling out their annual data on who got played the most. Apple Music Replay and Spotify Wrapped have these data sets. TikTok's got a version. Let's take a closer look with Dan Runcie. He's founder of Trapital, an industry publication that tracks business trends in music and beyond. Dan, great to reconnect.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So top of both Apple and Spotify's list is a recognizable name here, Taylor Swift. I mean, we know why.
Huge year. She released her latest studio album, Midnights, at the end of 2022, which had tons of room to have plenty of streams in 2023. But then she also re-released 2 very popular albums of hers in 2023, plus the massive tour and the records that it broke, plus the drama and all of the things that happened with Ticketmaster as well, plus the celebrity relationships. So it's no surprise that she's atop of this list and also named Times Person of the Year and several other accolades.
As you look throughout the lists a little bit further down, do you see the influence of social media platforms?
Definitely. And there's a few things that stick out with these lists because you also have the TikTok list as well. And while TikTok isn't a traditional streaming service like the other two, it still is a source where a lot of music discovery happens. And if you are a listener that's in the U.S., then you'll see a lot of representation by SZA.
I'm so mature, I'm so mature, I'm so mature, it got me in therapy.
Morgan Wallen.
Last night we let the liquor talk, I can't remember it.
If you're a user that's in Latin America, you likely saw much more from Bad Bunny or Peso Pluma or Karol G and artists like that.
You mentioned Morgan Wallen of country music fame, most listened to song of the year, Apple Music, but over on Spotify, most streamed is Flowers by Miley Cyrus. What accounts for that, do you think?
Country music itself, while it's grown its popularity across the globe, it still is a genre that is most popular in the US. And on a platform like Apple Music is much more centered around the users that are in the US, just considering the adoption with the iPhone, but they don't necessarily have the same level of penetration when you look everywhere else in the globe.
Now, we should spare a thought for wonderful artists who aren't such big names trying to get some attention on these streaming services. You know, they don't earn that much from these streaming services, do they?
No, and there's been a few changes that they've made with certain rules that have happened where Spotify had announced that they now have a minimum threshold of 1,000 streams in a year in order to start generating revenue from the services. And this is something that does affect a majority of the artists on these platforms, just considering how many artists have ever put any type of music on Spotify. There's a number of vested interests that want to see things continue to grow, but as things slow down, we're seeing a bit more debates around how best to split the current pie.
Dan Runcie is the founder of Trapital, which covers business trends in music, media, and entertainment. Thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And I'm David Brancaccio. This is the Marketplace Morning Report from APM, American Public Media.